All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. This is the second quarter of the online book club, and we're going to try to do interactive events like this every quarter, and we're going to have a different book selection every quarter. So there's a sign-up sheet in the back, so if you're not currently on our membership list and want to be, please go ahead and sign up with your name and email, and we'll make sure you get those announcements. We're also going to raffle off a few signed copies of the book today, so anytime you ask a question in the room or online, your name's going to be put in this raffle. So there's some ladies in the back that'll walk around and hand you a card if you ask a question, and you'll just write your name on it, and you'll get put in the jar. And similar, if you're online and ask a question, you'll automatically be put in. All right, so we're gonna Selena's gonna do a reading for us, and then we're gonna open up the floor to questions. So thank you very much, Professor Fehnel, for being here with us today.
You can just call me Salena.
Salena, all right. And,
okay. Should I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So this is actually the first reading that I've been able to do at Berkeley, so I'm very excited. I do readings somewhat regularly at bookstores and different author events, and this one's going to be very short because of time constraints. But normally when I do them at different events, they're between like 8 and 15 minutes long. This one is very short. Okay, if anyone's dreading. So the background is, I know many of you have read the book, but for those of you who haven't, the background of this scene is that 17-year-old Valentine is preparing to go to her mother's funeral. She found out that her mother passed away, and she's preparing to go to the funeral, and she is actually in the bathroom of the funeral home, which is the first line of the reading. I stand in the bathroom of the funeral home, in front of one of those mirrors that aren't real slivered glass, just weird, distorted, cheap metal that only really kind of show an outline when you look at them. I hate that sort of mirror. I can make out the squiggly line of myself in the new blue dress Angela and I found when we went shopping last night. I tried on 3, and on the 3rd dress found this, the perfect one. I smooth out the knee-length skirt and lean toward the warped mirror to fix smudges in my mascara. The funeral has been in process for 45 minutes now, and I know that when I walk out, it will still only be Kate, Angela, Jonathan, Penelope, and the funeral director standing in the room. Oh, don't think that nobody wants to come. Thanks to the fantastic reporting job done by the newspapers and the news stations, every 5 minutes or so a new freak or group of freaks shows up and tries to get in. I know why, too. They think maybe it's open casket, and that maybe, if they're lucky, they'll get a glimpse of what was left of someone after a train has hit them. The funeral director, or Kate, or someone apparently knew this would happen, and lo and behold, my mother's funeral actually has bouncers at the door. She probably would have loved that. I haven't looked. I haven't opened the pale birch coffin to look, and I won't. I don't need to. I know she's in there. I can just tell. But when I push open the bathroom door and walk out into the room, it's not just the 5 of us anymore. There's a 6th, and she's standing over my mother looking down at the closed coffin. Her back is to me. Her dark curls are pulled back in a long silver barrette, and she's wearing a pretty gray skirt and jacket. And when she turns, I grab the wall, because it's my mother staring back at me, and I can't even move my legs or speak.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So yeah, this time let's just open up the floor for questions.
Amber?
What inspired you to write this book? Like as far as the storyline and everything.
Well, for those of you who haven't read it, the storyline is multi-generational, so it spans 3 different women's lives. It starts out in present day, which is really around like 2009, and then it flashes backwards to the 80s, and then it flashes backwards again to the 60s. And I did it because I have always been really interested in how we become who we are based on our parents, and how we change, from what they were, or we stay the same. And so the book kind of it grew out of wanting to know more about Valentine, the 17-year-old, how her life became what it became, and that's why it took the form that it did.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna ask the same question, but I just thought of another one. So, are any of the characters like based off of someone in your life right now? Or are they just all completely made up?
Actually, let me repeat the question for the sake of the online viewers. Are any of the characters in the book based on people from your life?
Yes, the three main characters aren't. But like, I think, anytime a writer creates a character, there's pieces of real life within them. And so no, none of Valentine and Teresa and Caroline, the three core characters, aren't based off of anyone. They're more of like a composite of a lot of different characteristics of people that I've crossed paths with. And so no, that the answer is no to that.
Where can you get the book at?
You can get it from the library here. They bought a lot of copies, so you can always rent one, which is a great way. But if you want to purchase it, it's on Kindle, Nook, Barnes & Noble, and there's Amazon, too, if you want to go on there. And I always am floating around this campus because I live here. So a lot of these people know where to find me at all times, unfortunately. So you can always just track me down. I usually have a couple copies. Okay.
And there's a good number going around in our libraries right now.
So many,
Go right
yeah.
up to the third floor and talk to them, and they'll loan it to you.
How long did it take you to write the book?
How long did it take you to write the book?
On and off, like 7 years. Yeah, I started, if you read just the first maybe 30 pages or so, that was a exercise in my fiction class when I was in college, when I was an undergrad. And then I kind of grew it from there. But I think like really dedicated writing, somewhere around like 3 years.
Take a question from online here. Is there going to be a second book?
There won't be a second Nesting Dolls. Like, this is self-contained. But yes, there's my second book is coming out in June of 2015 of this year.
Oh, wow. Anything you want to tell us about that?
Well, it's very relevant to everyone here. It's completely different than this. It's light and it's funny, and it's based on a group of recent college graduates who are bogged down with their bills and totally broke and trying to figure out like how to live. So one night they get really, really wasted and they decide that they're going to simply break into the Federal Student Loan Database, and they're able to do so, but something goes really terribly wrong. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
That's called The Payment Plan. The Payment Plan is the second book. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about the Teresa character. Why chose her to get pregnant at a young age? Was it because of the violence at home?
This question is about Teresa and why she got pregnant at a young age, and was it related to the violence at home?
I mean, that's a really deep question. Do I think that she was a product of her parents' marriage? Yes, I do. I think that she always was a product of her mother, Caroline's, disinterest in her. And if I want to go like all psychological about it, she probably sought out comfort and companionship in her first boyfriend, and that resulted in a pregnancy.
Yes.
First of all, I love the book. It's really, really good. Do you think that there's a way, it's kind of deep, do you think that there's a way for future generations to kind of totally cut what has happened in the past generations, or are there certain things inevitable for the future?
I mean, I kind of ask myself that like every day. So What's my personal opinion? I think that everyone is able to change their stars, and that's one of the reasons that I wrote this, because I changed my own stars versus my parents' choices and my grandparents' choices, and I don't think you can ever cut out like your roots. I think that no matter what, some part of that influences who you are and influences your choices, and it might not even be conscious. So the answer to that would be yes and no, I guess. Yes, you can always change where you're going. And I know from speaking to many of you personally that you're here and you are first generation college students. And I was a first generation college student, and you're changing where you're going in life. Maybe very, very different from your parents' choices. So yeah, I would never discount being able to be someone very different, but I think that you keep pieces of your childhood and your roots with you while you do that.
Take another one from online. What made you decide to set up this book in 3 different ways, meaning telling the different stories?
Well, I set them up because once I wrote Valentine's section, there was a lot that needed explaining. Like, why was she where she was at? Why did she need to run away from home? Why was she so neglected by her mother? And so what I did was I flashed backwards to her mother's life when her mother was a teenager to show kind of how Valentine came to be. And then once I did that for Teresa, the question was, what shaped her? And that's why I flashed backwards a 3rd time.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Would you ever consider making the book into a movie?
Did you ever consider
I consider it?
making the book into a movie?
I think everyone would always love if their book was made into a movie. Do I think it would make? I think it would make a good movie because it's very each person is kind of compartmentalized in a way that would make it easy to watch, if that makes any sense. If you read the full book, you know what I mean by that. So yeah, that would really be amazing.
Would you star in the movie?
No, John, I'm a writer and a teacher. No.
How were you able to describe so diligently the emotions and feelings of the girls living in the coop? Did you make any sort of research or approach any expert?
That's a really interesting question because my research is based on working with a couple of students at Berkeley, not current students. If you aren't familiar with the plot, the coop is a girls' shelter, a women's shelter that she lives in when she's pregnant. And about 5 years ago, I talked to 2 students who really kind of were in a rough spot and were trying their hardest to change their own stars. And they were both staying at a women's shelter, and it just gave me a really new perspective of what that looks like. Yeah, it was I learn a lot from students all the time, especially because I teach writing. So, they pour all their hopes and dreams and sad things into the writing, and sometimes you have no idea what is going on in their lives.
Absolutely.
So how did you come up with this title? So from reading this versus what I thought the book was going to be, is completely different?
Really?
Yeah.
What did you think it would be? Now it's your question. That surprises me.
I didn't see it so much as a thriller or to be so captivated into the story. Like right from the beginning, and when you read Little Valentine, and everything that's going on, you get so hooked on the book. I literally read the book in like a day and a half. So from looking at Nesting Dolls, that's not what I expected.
Well, the original title was actually not Nesting Dolls. The publisher felt and was correct in feeling that this title is shorter, it's easier to remember, it's kind of more gripping. The original title was Undoings of a Nesting Doll, and that's what the manuscript's title was forever until this actually until it went to print, it was Undoings of a Nesting Doll. And I titled it that because I thought of nesting dolls because they, you know, are nestled one within the other, and that's kind of goes back to your question. They, no matter what you do, they still came from the larger one, and so it has kind of this continuity of whatever the larger one was. You open it up, and then there's a smaller one. You open that one up, and there's a smaller one. And because I was doing a generational novel that explores mothers, daughters, grandmothers, and how they come from each other, that was the image that came to mind for the title for me. So.
Yes. Which character did you have the hardest writing about and learned the most from yourself?
Do you want to repeat that and give me a minute to think?
Actually, can you repeat the question one more time?
Which character was the hardest to write about, and did you learn the most about?
Which character was the hardest to write about, and did you learn the most about in the process?
I would say there are two different answers. The hardest to write about was Teresa because, she fell into addiction issues very early in life, and I don't have experience with addiction issues. So to make her reality believable and like tangible to the reader, I felt like I had a lot of pressure on me because I don't come from addiction in a way that I could speak of it with justice, like to show that the way that it really is. So that was probably the hardest. The one that I learned the most about was Caroline because people just hate her. They just hate her. Every person that I talk to tells me they want to punch her in the face. And as I was writing her, I had to really try to understand why she made the choices that she made, which were to most people like unspeakable choices. And so I really learned a lot when I was writing her. Characters surprise me sometimes with random things they do. So.
What helped you keep the book so raw and relatable?
I'm going to go with dialogue. I love writing dialogue. I love writing conversations more than I like prose, which are just like the long, winding paragraphs about, like the color of the fence. I don't love that. I like to show relationships. And so I think when people say that they, other than the actual like content of it being about generational domestic abuse, escaping bad situations, I think that people find it relatable because the characters talk the way that we talk. And it's not, it doesn't feel foreign to read it.
Absolutely. So who is your favorite character?
Bill. Yeah.
Why?
I found him very lovable. Yeah, he was just really, really lovable. He was a good character. Of the women? Are you asking me of the women?
In general, your favorite character in the story?
Bill.
So just thinking back to our discussion boards that we've been participating in the last couple of weeks, do you consider him to be a strong or weak person?
Oh, this is a question that I get a lot. No, I consider him to be a very strong person. People always ask like that question, or it's strange. Like, was he very, very weak, or was he very, very strong? Because he waited so long for her. He waited years and years and years. And I think that he was very strong in his love for her. But as a mother, I think he was very weak as a parent, because I can't imagine his motives for not going after his daughter when she disappeared. I don't know as a father why, he wouldn't try harder than he did. So.
It's tough. So do you have a favorite place or time to write?
Like me physically? Are you asking?
Yeah, you personally. And
oh, like where do I like to write? Oh, I thought you meant like a setting. Yeah, I like bookstores and places with hot chocolate and food. I don't write very regularly. I don't write in like it's 7 a.m. I should sit down and like write. I tend to write in like really big chunks and then just kind of go brain dead for like a week and a half or a month or two. And then I go back to it and write really big chunks. But I definitely am the most productive when I am surrounded by books. So if I go to a bookstore, I can sit, and as long as I have like something chocolatey and something carby, I will just continually write happily for a while.
Thank you.
Oh, so many hands.
Do you have a best and worst part of your writing process?
Best and worst part of your writing process?
That's a good question. The worst part for me is definitely revising. It's like once I spew something out, I have a really hard time changing it. And that's actually just extremely arrogant. But I have a hard time changing it because normally the way that it comes out is like the way that I feel it should be. But my favorite part of writing is probably, honestly, it's the beginning of stories. Like the beginning of each of the 3 chapters are my favorite because I just feel so like excited and happy to like jump in. And then, midway I'm ready to just never see it again or see any of it again.
I know you said it took you a couple of years or a while to finish writing the book. Did you get frustrated at the time? Like, did you ever get at one point be like, I'm so frustrated. Why am I not finished with this book yet?
Like every other day. Every other day. Yeah, it was very. Sometimes I just really hate writing. Sometimes I hate it. But then I just love it so much. We're in a very abusive relationship. Yeah, it's very frustrating, especially when it takes long, long times to get some stuff out.
So with that, how long did the revision take? Just the revision part of the book?
The revision for this?
Yeah.
From the time that like I submitted the actual full novel as you see it, about a year and a half. Probably, yeah, about a year and a half. There was, it's hard because it goes through so many revisions. Like with the payment plan, I just finished the final revision before it goes into what we call ARCs, which are the advanced reader copies. They look just like this, but they have like a giant banner across the front that says ARC, and that's what goes to reviewers. But as I turned it in, my husband was like, so just turn it in because, you're going to get it back in like 4 days and have to make more changes anyway. And so there's a lot of revisions. It's just kind of cyclical.
This is a question. Has anybody actually audited?
Wait, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Has anybody asked for your autograph yet?
Yes.
John.
Yes.
John did.
I did.
I mean, John did. But yeah, I mean, well, at book signings and stuff, yeah, they, but do you mean just walking down the street? No one cares who I am. John does, but no, other than.
Back over here.
Where do you find the time to write?
Where do you find the time to write?
It just, I guess, well, I don't work out. So in the same way you would ask someone like how do they find the time to work out regularly, I substitute in writing for a lot of other activities that I should be doing on time, I guess. With this, I was in college, I had no child, so it was a lot easier, yeah. Although it still took me longer than anything. And with the payment plan, I wanted to finish it before I popped out a child, so I put myself on a 60-day deadline to write it. And I love writing, so it's not like I have to, I shouldn't say that because I do have to force myself to do it, but it's something that I really enjoy. So you just kind of like find some time.
I don't know the whole process of writing a book, but how long did it take from the time you finished writing it to actually being published?
Well, I finished it completely in June of 2010. and it was published July 15th, 2014. So 4 years. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to become a published writer?
Any advice for someone who's trying to become a published writer?
Yeah, I mean, the publishing world is such crap. It just is. It's so hard, and it breaks you down really badly. But yeah, I would say write everything that you have, and then seek out people that would love it. It's hard. Are you the writer? Because we should talk after class. Okay. Okay.
Do you have any idea of the characters' personalities prior to writing, or do the characters' personalities develop as you're writing the book?
I love that question. No, they develop as I write it. Sometimes I'm really surprised what happens too, and I know that's weird because I'm writing it. And people, that's always an interesting question, but no, they really shape and kind of come to life and flesh out as I'm writing. So, like, Caroline really was much different than I anticipated her to be by the time I was done. So that's a good question. I don't have any preconceived notion of characters at all. I get a really good idea once they start talking to other characters, and I'm like, oh, that's who you are, because you can tell through like conversation a lot about somebody. So yeah, that's a.
You kind of touched on this a little bit. I just wanted to ask you a question with the nesting dolls. Was it more difficult to begin the story or to end it?
Is it more difficult to begin or end the story?
Oh, beginning it was cake. Yeah, because I was writing a short story about a 17-year-old girl who was like escaping an abusive home. So it was so easy to start it. It was finishing it that was actually. Do you mean like the ending? Was it hard just to create the ending? Yeah, I would say it's hard to create an ending because it's like there comes a moment where it's like the last time you'll ever edit it, and then it's going to go out and people's eyes are going to see it. So it's like nerve-wracking to actually make that final call, like, okay, this is the final page, and that's it. So they're both hard, but I guess ending is probably harder than beginning.
Okay, you said that you got a lot of your inspiration from writing the book from students and everything, and you had trouble writing one of the characters because they had
addiction issues.
Issues. Did you ever think to like, okay, I'm pretty sure there's students that either witnessed someone with addiction issues or parents or something, or had their own addiction issues?
Yes, I have talked to, yes. The answer to that is, and that's what helped me create a lot of her, a lot of understanding alcoholism. Because I don't have a background in understanding it, and the way that it happens for her is very organic in her life. So I wanted to understand how that happened. So yes, I did talk to quite a few people who have that directly related to them.
Yes, please.
Who is the biggest supporter of your writing? Who supports you the most? Gives you inspiration?
I mean, my husband. Yeah, my husband Ryan, who's maybe watching this possibly, or else has it on mute and is playing the guitar. No, he really has allowed me to grow as a writer, and it goes back to the time question. There's a lot of really crappy things about being married to a writer, and one of them is that dishes are never loaded in the dishwasher, and the house is always just a complete, it's really bad all the time. And he picks up those ends of everything, and when I'm in a writing binge or just writing like crazy, he's cleaning and helping and supporting and bringing me chocolate and tea and saying, you can do it. So yeah, he's definitely my biggest supporter. Maybe not my biggest fan, but Still biggest supporter.
Of the 2 books that you've written, which is your overall favorite generally?
Well, I've actually written 3.
I didn't know if I was supposed to say that.
That,
That's the second question.
Well, the 3rd is called Fortune Maker, and it's probably my favorite of all of the books. So that's why it was a hard. My favorite is probably going to be Fortune Maker, which is based on a woman in 1908 who was always considered a widow of misfortune because all of her husbands died of just really sad accidents like meat cleavers to the head. And all of her children died of really strange drowning and fire accidents. So she it's a historical fiction novel, so that a lot of research has gone into that because she's a real person, and they were real events. But that's probably my favorite.
And coming out. Interesting imagination.
That is coming out. I don't even want to say because if the publisher's watching, and I haven't really, it's slated for January 2016, but maybe June 2016. I don't know. Sometime in 2016, that one will be out, and I am excited for that. That's been fun to write.
So are you on a 4th book now? You working, what are you working on now?
Yes, but I'm not going to talk about the 4th one.
Can I base it off me?
Matt?
All right. Yes, please.
How old were you when you wrote your first book?
How old were you when you wrote
It
your first
spanned
book?
a lot of time. When I started Valentine's Story, I was 19 years old. And if you're doing the math, which people are always doing the math, I'm 29 right now. So on and off, it was 9 years of writing. But it's funny because it's kind of like I grew with the characters because Valentine is 17 and I wrote her when I was 19. And then by the time I got to Caroline's section, I was 26 years old and had a better idea of life than I would have at 19. Like I can't imagine being 19 and writing her story, but maybe it just would have been a very different story. So yeah, so that's when I started it.
Someone says, I absolutely love the book, the way it was written, all the connecting stories, that it was almost written backwards. Did you plan on writing it in that style, or did it sort of just come together that way?
Oh, no, that's a great question. No, it wasn't written backwards. I actually had to triple check myself because there are a lot of things that happened in this 1980s that peek out in Valentine's present day section. No, I wrote it as you read it. I wrote it Valentine's and then Teresa's and then Caroline's section. So it came together, but there's a lot of fact checking. My mentor in my master's program was Lenore Hart, and she is amazing at that. She writes a lot of historical fiction. So double checking that, we call it continuity for weird things that don't seem out of place.
Thank you. Are any of your characters inspired by people you know? Beyond these, you did mention a couple of students for one section of the book.
I somewhat, a little bit, but not mainly. Like they're not. I don't need like the disclaimer that's like, all likenesses to this person are completely by accident, because it's not like that. But I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, which is like I think pieces of people creep in all over. I know for sure in the payment plan now that there's so many aspects of people I know in the characters. So yeah, I would imagine that they were somewhat. There's some inspiration from real life people.
Thank you. Yes, please.
What's your favorite scene in the book?
What is your favorite scene in the book?
When Bill is teaching little Teresa how to play the guitar and they're singing Elton John together. I really loved that. I actually originally had a larger chunk of Elton John's song in there, but it cost like $1 million to get rights to it, to keep it in over 2 lines. So that's why there's only a small snippet of it, because I originally had 8 lines. It doesn't actually cost $1 million, but it costs tens of thousands of dollars to buy rights to a song to put them in a book. So that's my favorite stuff. That's my favorite scene. I love that scene. Yeah.
Did you struggle with any particular aspect of the book when writing it, such as the voice of a particular character?
No, I mean, I struggle always at the beginning with establishing a voice. Like, so it's kind of like when you're getting to know someone and you don't really know, like, you don't know real them yet. You only kind of see surface them. So in that way, like, my characters always have kind of like a skeleton, and then I put flesh on them. I continually put flesh on them. And so I struggle at the beginning with voices because I don't really know who they are. But then once I'm more into the story, I end up going back and changing the earlier versions of them because they kind of like show themselves more, and I can solidify their character better.
Okay.
Was that kind of how you come up with names as you go, or did you pick Valentine and Teresa?
Yeah, well, so Valentine I picked to go along with the beginning of the story. I think it's actually the very first page. Yeah, Val made her entrance into the bright lights of the maternity ward, shrieking and naked at 12:04 a.m. on February 14th. And her mother was a child, and she named her Valentine because she had her on Valentine's Day. Teresa, I put in her character because I was using the name Teresa, which is one of my best friend's names, as a placeholder. And then once it was there, I just never could take it out because she fully became that. And Caroline I named after the mom on Little House on the Prairie because I love Little House on the Prairie and loved it growing up. So that's where they came from.
Do you personally relate to any of the characters in the book?
Personally relate to any of the characters in the book?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I relate a lot. I relate a lot to Valentine, I think, because she has to work really, really hard to change patterns. And the book's theme, and the reason that I work so closely with a women's shelter, which is like one of my charitable causes. When I do book events, they get a portion of the profits, is because I think that when you are coming from a place that patterns in your parents' relationship and your grandparents' relationship kind of sets the tone for the rest of your life, you have to work really hard to not follow that pattern. And so I relate to Valentine because I changed a lot of, I was a lot of firsts in my family, which I know a lot of you are first to do something in your family. And Valentine is first differently. She's the first to break, the pattern of being in a really abusive relationship. But she's also the first in a lot of different ways. And I think that's what makes her very strong. And even though I wrote her so long ago, I still have like an attachment to her as the character.
Did any major events change between the draft and the publication? No, actually, the book was shopped out to publishers for close to a year and a half, and they really, really wanted every publisher that was coming back through my literary agent was saying the same thing, that the economy was in the dumps, everyone was really sad right now in America, and they wanted happier endings. And so they had ideas about taking the book and changing it in a way that would give people more of like a warm, fuzzy feeling, which if you've read it fully, it should give you somewhat of a warm, fuzzy feeling, just not in the way that's like,
I guess, like Nicholas Sparksy, where you're like, oh, that was so nice, I'm gonna go to bed. You know, it's not like that. You kind of like have more of you experience more of a gritty reality with it. But what was the original question? Okay, I got it. The publisher that I ultimately went with was Northampton House Press. They're amazing. They're a small press, and they were not like what we call the Big Six, which are like Random House and Penguin. They didn't want any changes. They loved it as it was. They didn't mind that there's like grittiness to reality, and they didn't ask me to make it fluffy. So no, what you read is really, for this, is what I wrote. Yeah.
Yes.
Is there another author that inspired you to become a writer?
Is there any other author that provided you inspiration?
I guess Roald Dahl, probably. Like growing up, I read so much all the time. Anna Martin too, with the Babysitter's Club series. I was always devouring them when I was little. But Roald Dahl's writing was always just like really comforting to me. And my little sister and I would read it together. But my mother actually just unearthed my first book, which is called Raccoons Rock and Roll, if anyone's interested. And it was from when I was 8 years old. So I've always loved writing. It's been my favorite thing to do next to reading for my whole life.
What advice can you give to aspiring writers to keep their work engaging?
I mean, I guess that depends on what you like to read. I don't like to read long-winded paragraphs where I'm like reading and then I realize that I got to the bottom of the paragraph and I don't know what I read, so I have to skip back up. And that happens a lot when I'm not engaged. And what keeps me from doing that is when there's a lot of dialogue. When I see a lot of conversation and like movement between characters, I tend to stay much more engaged with the story. So, but I guess that really depends, because a lot of people love literary fiction, which is much more verbose in the way that it's written. So that's just a preference.
What do you love about being a fiction teacher?
I love teaching. I love teaching. There's just so many things. No, I love seeing students discover something in my classes. And it's often not out loud, especially like in the writing classes. They'll have this epiphany about themselves when they're writing. And I think that that's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing to roll your eyes and be irritated when I assign a free write, and then spend 15 minutes writing and be like, oh, this is actually making me feel blank. And there's a quote, and it's something like, I don't know, writing is the closest that I come to being magical or a wizard, because you're putting something on the page that causes people to feel things, and that's really amazing. And so when I teach, I love seeing that process in students. I think it's beautiful that students are able to kind of find a piece of themselves in their writing.
Well put. Any other questions?
If someone were to ask you to help them co-write a story, would you actually help them co-write it, or would you just give them advice on which way they should go with it?
Are you saying cold write?
Co-write.
Collaborate on a work.
Oh, like a fiction piece?
Sure.
Or like nonfiction? I'm saying because I just published a chapter in an anthology on how to teach in an English classroom, so I would definitely co-write that way.
No, so not that kind of way, like a story kind of way.
No, probably not, because I don't like to share. So I don't like to share stories, because then I would just become bossy and weird, and I what they see for their story might be different than what I see, and I don't know. I think you kind of own a story in a way that fiction-wise, it would be hard to share. But that's just me. A lot of people co-write, so it's just my preference.
Yes.
Would you ever want to share your own story? Like, would you ever want to write a book about your own life?
Like a memoir?
Yeah, I guess.
No. No.
Why not?
Oh, my life is so boring.
No, it's not. You're
I
awesome.
didn't think from the little story that you told us, I thought it would be really interesting.
No. I don't have any desire to ever write a memoir. You know what? There's just so many cool stories to tell in my brain that I don't have like the time to get going, that my own personal story is like at the bottom of that list for interesting.
Great. Any other questions?
For teaching, what gave you the thought of teaching differently? Because when I started, this is my first time taking your class, seeing how you teach is totally different from other teachers. What made you be different?
Well, I didn't know that, so that's interesting. I'm not sure what you mean.
Like,
which part is different?
Like, you make us think more deep and personal and see what makes us different and what we see in other stories and movies as well.
I think you teach realistically.
Yeah.
More like what's going on now. Yeah, you get involved and you get.
What made you teach that way?
Probably because that's how I like to learn. And so, I've been through too many years of classes to like even keep track of anymore. And I like to learn in a way that engages me. And I think that I have the pleasure, the honor of teaching humanities courses. So if I had to teach anatomy and physiology, it would be less fun to some extent because there's just certain content that you have to be able to get across to students. But, a large part of my job in teaching writing and literature is to make you think and grow. And so I think that I teach the way that I do, which I didn't know is very different until you just said that, and now I feel really self-conscious.
In a great way.
I think I teach the way I do because it's just, it's how I learn. And the other part of that you asked about is, I think a large part of learning is being connected to who you're learning from. And I don't think that there should be weird barriers. That I think you connect better if you're on the same plane and it's just one person sharing information with another person. That I could learn. Every person that I teach can sit down and they could lecture me on something that they're excellent at. And so to even it out, I think makes the classroom just better to be in. It's how I like to learn. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
If you could change something about your book, what would it be? Like now that you already released it.
If you could change something about your book, what would it be? If anything.
That's a really hard question. Oh yeah, I would. You know what? Sometimes when I read Valentine's section, and I'm sure this is because of aging, I should seem juvenile, but sometimes when I read her section, I'm like, oh, you were a really crappy writer back then. And then when I read Teresa's and Caroline's, because they came later, I feel more like that's my writing. So I guess if I could change it, I would go back to Valentine's section and I would add in some of my own current writing style, because when I read her chapter or her section of the book, it's kind of like looking at an old yearbook picture of myself. Like I'm like, oh, okay. And then when I move through the book, I'm like, okay, there's me in college and there's me present, because my writing really changed. As I grew and learned, I did my master's in creative writing, so Valentine was way written by then. So that's probably what I would change in it.
Okay, I think we're gonna. Oh, another question?
I know you said you always liked writing, but when did you decide that you wanted to become a professional writer?
Probably around the time that I started writing this, like right around.
19?
No, probably earlier than that. In my senior year of high school, I knew like I wanted to be. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have always, since I was like 4 years old, played school and made my sister Sherry sit with my Cabbage Patch dolls so that I could teach them forever. So I've always wanted to be a teacher. And when people ask me what I do for a living, I say I'm a teacher because that's my first and foremost like passion in my career. But I've always wanted to write. I would write whether or not I got published, if that makes sense. Like I would still write the same amount of books in the same way if no one ever read them, because it's just kind of like a part of what I love to do.
So any words of wisdom you want to leave everybody with here before we wrap up?
No, I love this though. This was, I mean, if you are thinking about writing, okay, and I know that I've talked one-on-one with a couple of you, but there's also a lot of new faces in the crowd. But just talk to me or to someone else that has written, because I will say this: the easiest way to break into trying to navigate publishing is to know someone who's been published and who kind of has gone that gauntlet. And I was very, very fortunate to have that, and have someone who directed me directly to how to get a literary agent and how to move forward with publishing and make those connections for me. But it is very, very hard if you don't have any direction. And I think one of the most fantastic things about going to college, besides the education and like changing where you're going in life, is that you make so many connections that you wouldn't in the outside world. So I know that many, many people here, professors, staff members, are so talented, and you might not even know what they do. I mean, a lot of people don't know that I write until tonight, apparently, until they asked to use this. So just talk to people and network. That's the biggest thing, I think, for moving forward with professional writing.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me. This was fantastic.
A big round of applause, please. We're going to go ahead and raffle off these copies of the books. Great. Those that ask questions, I'm just bringing that up. And just a reminder, we're going to do a new book every quarter. We're going to try to have events like this. Okay. If you're interested in getting more information, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. If you leave your email, we'll get you on the mailing list.
Okay, so we have 3 copies, right?
Is your mailing list like when we joined like the book club?
I think so.
Online? Is that what
If you've gotten an email from me, then just sign up just in case. Okay. I'm gonna I'll duplicate whoever signed up on Goodreads. If you use your full name, I'll look up your email address. Okay. If not, I'll do it.
Okay.
We have 3 copies, yes?
Yes, we have 3 copies.
Okay. One of them is going to be this copy that I just read out of and kind of bent the front of.
Okay,
so
that is one. So, and these 2. So go ahead and pick and I'll bring it home.
Feel it.
Okay.
Good. All right. I think you were somebody to sign them. Yeah.
Do you want to
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
okay.
Yes, you know where to find me.
Okay. I'll let you sign them.
Regina won one.
For you and out there.
That's Regina. Yes.
Who's our second person?
Regina Espinosa.
Regina, okay.
And number 3 is Ashley Stracco.
Excellent.
Right next to each other. Okay. So yeah, this was wonderful.
Yes, well, thanks again, everybody, for coming, and I hope to see you all involved. Actually, the online discussion is still continuing through the end of week 5, so feel free to get on there in Goodreads and participate.
That's great.
And there's food in the back, so let's make sure that gets eaten.
Thank you.
And coffee.
And if you're all wondering what you have to do now, you can go home.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
This is so great.